Hello and welcome to another episode of Faith Talk, where we talk all things theology, religion, and life's tough questions. I'm Oliver, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Payton.
Welcome to an online edition of Faith Talk.
Yeah, and so as you can see, this is kind of a new format for us. These two guys, Payton and Sammy, are actually off to college right now, which is why we have to do this online meeting. But yeah, we're happy for these guys getting a good education. And yeah, so today our guest is our producer, Sammy. So Sammy, thanks so much for being on the show.
Of course, I wouldn't want to miss it. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess
it would
we
be a
can
little
just-
awkward if you missed it. Yeah, we wouldn't.
I guess it would be like
even online. We still need you to help with the microphone. So
yeah,
in our group chat. If I missed it, yeah, again, that would be awkward.
a little awkward. Yeah.
Just
Just
a little bit. That's
bit.
okay. That's okay. I have some business cards though. I should start handing them out.
Oh
Yes.
yes, definitely.
Oh, we have a radio station here on campus.
Hey, there you go.
Wow.
I gotta make a stop down there.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
doing
right
promoting.
after.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we just might as well just dive right into today's conversation,
Mm-hmm.
which Sammy, mind introducing?
Yeah. So we've talked about a little about this on a weekly word on Wednesday, but our topic today will be music and anything music related.
It's a very
I guess that
broad
you can-
topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, you can say
Yeah.
that's my. Well, I wouldn't say expertise because as you learn, especially in college where there's so many different people who have so many different talents, But I like to say, I'm my own at-home professional.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is your moment for your shameless plug for your music before we get into the
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh yeah. You go follow all platforms. S4M. We got a song for Mochi. We got Mochi P. We've got all those things. Some beats if anyone wants to have some beats. The Faith Talk theme song is a beat
Yeah.
that I made a little while before and turned into now it's the face of Faith Talk.
Yeah. I'm telling you, you're gonna be famous one day, man. Watch. I'm claiming it right now, right here on this recording. So one day,
We'll see about that. We'll see what
Sammy's down the
happens.
line, you're gonna have to come back to this. You're gonna be like, wow, Oliver called it.
Be out in the studio,
Music is like it's such a broad topic. I think it's one of those examples of something that is one of the most powerful things that God gave us. It's both one of our greatest blessings, and it's also one of the things that the devil has abused so much. So the devil attacks everything that's most sacred, I guess, and I think music is one of the most sacred things.
Yeah, it's crazy because I just started my classes this week, and my first day on Monday I had a class, and so I started it. It's called Intro to Music, and so my major isn't exactly music. It's just one of the fine arts credits that I needed. I love music, so I thought let's take this. And there's a lot of people in that class. There's something like 50 people, and but the first day what we did is we went through some tracks, and the professor, he was saying, all right, he played some music, and then he played some audio, and then he said, all right, so would you describe this as music? And he would go through and he asked people the definition of music, and one of the pieces that he played is by I guess they would say controversial composer, and you can look him up on Spotify and things. There's a song called 4:33 in the essence of 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The song has been performed by many people, and what's weird is it's different every single time because there's nothing.
What? There's nothing?
Yeah. I looked after he started playing it. I looked it up on Spotify and played it at full volume. There's no sound in the
So it's just 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence.
of silence.
How does one play that differently?
Well, because so the way he played it for us is that he showed a performance of 4:33, So the pianist walked up to the piano, sat down, and closed the lid and sat there. And it's kind of funny. And then he at one point he opened it up and then closed it again. Just to emphasize the silence. And that's what's so strange. And people actually like put the definition to music of it, and in essence it is. And that's why I say it's different every single time, because that music opens the doors of your own listening, right? So whatever's going on while you're listening to that song is that song for you. So your first time listening to that song will not be the same at any time, which is weird. So it's a very, again, why music is such a broad topic. It's so abstract. It's very different. It's called 4 minutes and 33 seconds by John Cage. If you ever look it up,
that's the epitome of modern art and culture and music. It's so abstract.
Yeah. And the thing about this is that this piece wasn't done modern, or okay, it was in modern times, but it was made in 1991.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. So you'd think, like you're thinking about like abstract art, like someone put a blank canvas and said, imagine it or something like that. It's kind of the same thing, but you'd think that's more 2000s era, 2010s, but 1990s. I was surprised when I saw that.
I feel like we have music in practically every environment we go into, and it serves a different purpose many times. And I think it's one of those things. We've talked a lot about movies as well on the podcast, about how you can take, even out of a secular movie or film, TV show, you can take spiritual applications. You feel like we can do the same thing with music?
Oh, for sure. And well, speaking of music and movies, I remember a long time ago I watched a YouTube video, and it was people took the music out of popular movies, and one of them was Indiana Jones, and it was just him on a horse galloping through canyons, and it's just like it just continues because like different scenes, and then the music is what makes it dramatic. That's why it can be both bringing in spiritual aspects. That's why music, and spiritual and personal aspects. That's why music has such a big impact on people, and that's why it's so powerful. Is that it has the making to make people feel a certain way. So in the same way that horror movies, there's even some sounds in horror movie soundtracks that are inaudible to our ears, but you can feel them, and that's on purpose to make people on edge. It's music is in a way it's a feeling. In your own perspective, you'll feel something different.
Yeah, it's crazy how powerful music can be. You and me, Sam, are kind of on the same wavelength about how like the musics and sounds and movies can even affect your emotions. Music can warp and make you feel things that you either didn't intend to feel, or maybe you were feeling, and then now it amplifies that feeling. But just to kind of bank off that, earlier today I was watching Princess and the Frog. It's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. And it was the scene where the little firefly died. Spoiler alert. But it was the scene where the little firefly died. And they were playing this really, really sad instrumental piece. And for whatever reason, the thought popped into my mind, what if they played the song Danger Zone from Top Gun over that scene? And I was thinking about it would completely change the mood of that scene. Like, it wouldn't be sad anymore. You'd be like either confused, you'd be happy. It was like, wow, that's crazy. Just how just simply by changing the music, you change the entire mood of a scene or an event.
I guess that is very true. You could change a drama into a comedy very quickly just with the music.
Oh, that's so true. And it kind of takes it back to realizing where the core of it is in the world today. It's like, it's about feeling, There's so much that God has given us that gives us good feelings. It's kind of like dopamine, right? It gives us this high of feeling good. And it can be used for good or for evil. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so dangerous to be completely guided by those feelings, right? Because then it can lead you down a dangerous road. we can like control it, right? We can say, okay, I'm in a bad mood. I'm gonna listen to like a small amount of these sorts of songs, but I also need to control myself so that I'm not spending my entire life just listening to that. And it literally, like, music in and of itself can control your life and your moods in a way, which is a kind of a crazy thing to think about. I don't know if we think about that very often.
Yeah, yeah, that's like for sure. Like that's a big thing, and sometimes it is the feeling of the music because you'll listen to a song and be like, "This is such a happy song." It makes you feel happy, and sometimes you don't even look at the lyrics. Like before the lyrics, like you look at the lyrics, it feels like a happy song, right? It feels, and that's just because of the way it's composed, you know.
Right.
And some artists do that on purpose. I know that I've done a little bit of that. Is that you change the feel by adding different sounds, and even it can be in the same key, same, it'll sound all right together, but it will completely change it from a sad sounding song into a happy sounding song. And that's and again, while lyrics are something that we should always be aware of as well, um, sometimes with taken with a grain of salt, sometimes they won't affect the feel of the song.
That's an interesting
That's
point.
it. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, to kind of bank off that the whole lyrics thing, I would actually say it is really important to kind of know what you're listening to, even if it doesn't affect the mood of your song. My aunt always said that your brain is like a tape recorder. It's gonna play back what it hears, and even if you don't realize what you're listening to, I found myself doing this many times where I'll just be walking along and I start singing a song, and I'll just sing the lyrics to that song, and then I didn't even realize what I was saying when I heard the song, but now here I am, I'm saying it out of my mouth because I didn't pay attention to those lyrics. And just by the fact that it's now a musical tune and it's stuck in your head, now that's something you're saying, just singing randomly. And so that's kind of why it's important to know what you're listening to before you listen to it, because you could find yourself saying those same things without knowing the harm or damage of what you're doing.
Yeah. The devil can sneak in that way, right? Because there's so much good music out there. But you could even find, even in Christian music, you find some songs that if you don't listen to the lyrics, you don't realize what you're feeding yourself. It's kind of like what you were saying, Oliver, about how in that scene in The Princess and the Frog, if you would change the song, it totally changes the whole thing. But if we change the lyrics and have the same beat, kind of like what you were saying, Sammy, sometimes you don't notice it, but it's still there subconsciously. And even Pastor K gave a sermon not too long ago where he was talking about the idea of self-denial, right, which is one of those unpopular things about the Christian walk. And he said, even if you listen to our Christian music today, who's it all about? It's all about me. About me. It's like it's ideas that can be very damaging seep in where we least expect them. Like even friends, even when you're listening to your gospel music, you got to be careful what you're actually consuming because you may not realize it, but something you're listening to could actually be damaging.
Yeah, it's it's the truth, and like Oliver was saying, I think I think it's never my place to say, like, I listen to a lot of different music, and so it's never my place to say what anyone should listen to, but it's always good to know what you're listening to, especially lyrically, because like I was saying, and like Oliver was saying, if you put those two together, like the music can make you feel a certain way without you realizing what the lyrics are, and then you're listening to it, and like you said, then it's like a tape recorder, so it's still I always just say, definitely know what you're listening to.
That's a really good point. Because like you said, we're not trying to we're not calling out any particular song, right? We're making overarching statements. So you're exactly right. Really what it is about knowing what you're listening to, being aware of it. And there's so much good music, and it goes the other way too, right? Sometimes the church will call out a certain type of music and say, oh, all rap is bad or whatever like that. I think we said before, rap gets a bad rap. I was like, well, hold on. Listen to the lyrics, and you may change your mind. You may be justified too. It depends on what song you're listening to. But you can't make that overarching statement. The only overarching statement we can make is know what you're listening to.
Yeah. And I always have to bring up this quote because I mean it always seems to come up in like biblical discussions. It's one quote that I texted Payton when he was up on stage, and it's a Star Wars quote. It's, only a Sith deals in absolutes. You know, you gotta. I mean, that's something you gotta be careful with absolutes, especially in such a broad topic about music. So, like you were saying, you can't say all rap is bad, you know. But then again, you can't say all Christian music is extremely healthy either. Like, you've gotta. Again, it's such a broad topic that the only thing that's great to say is know what you're listening to.
Really
know what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often debated: should Christians listen to secular music? I think it's absolutely fine. Just like as you were saying, as long as you know what you're listening to. I think this is something we discussed in our old Bible class back during senior year. But the question was, can Christians listen to secular music? And then somebody said, well, yeah. But I think what happens is a lot of people think that what will happen is you'll almost start to be like mind controlled of like you're listening to this music, maybe it's about drugs or something, and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing drugs. Well, it can be like that sometimes, you know, like if you don't pay attention to what you're listening to, you might find yourself in that hole, which is why it's so important to know what you're listening to. It's okay to listen to that type of music. Just realize what you're listening to and have control over your mind.
We have a raised hand.
Just raise my hand. Yeah, no, I hope this is okay for me to bring up, but it's similar to a conversation that I had with Payton last year, and I know it was brought up also in our senior Bible class, is that we bring up the point: is it okay then to eat pork? Now, I would say that these can go in a way. You can make a point with what we said with that can go along with music, is that if it's a problem with someone else and someone else's, I guess you can say, salvation, if it's something that's holding someone else back, then I would say that's when it's definitely something to reconsider. But when it's, you know, I think, you know, in your own choices, in your own conviction, you know, you can make, you know, you realize what is right and wrong, you know, and again, as long as you know what's going on. But again, I think you really want to. Now, okay, I say that, but also there are also times when you can't be passive, and
Right.
That is not my intent in saying that, because while yes, you don't want to mess with anyone else's salvation, you never want to be passive, especially with your beliefs. And I would say that there's also a time to be straightforward and to call out sometimes the most, I guess you say, devout church members, because there's time you never want to do it in a rude way, but per se, like different music, you know, that you're playing, and you know, if someone's saying you're gonna go to hell because of this music, and even if you can say it's Christian rap, right? But people are saying, you know, this and that. I think that's definitely a time to maybe point out your own belief system and point out your beliefs. And I mean, this is faith talk. You know, this is talking about faith. I don't know if you want to say.
Well, it's very true. There's a lot there. Yes, there's always times to call people out. I mean, for one, based on that last thing you just said, nobody ever has the right to tell anybody they're going to hell but God alone. Like that I'm sorry, that drives me up a wall. There's certainly times to make discernment. There's certainly times to say what you're doing is wrong. But you can never say that what you're doing is certainly going to lead you to hell, because we don't know where that person's at with Christ.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Exactly. It's true. It's an absolute statement of somebody's heart that we can't know. The heart is extremely complicated. But, you know, more broadly, kind of back to what you brought up, what we're really talking about almost is things that are not inherently bad that can become bad, right? When Paul was talking about those things, and Paul talked about certain meats and things like that, he was saying, look, to me, it's not a problem. I'm right with God. It's okay. But he also said, if that thing will cause another brother to stumble, then I will never do that thing again in order to not cause that brother to stumble. Anything
Right.
we do to cause somebody to stumble, unless of course it's a righteous thing you're doing, is a problem, even if it's not inherently bad. Like say you're watching a movie and somebody in the audience or somebody who's near you doesn't approve of that movie. It's sometimes not worth the fight, and you may be causing more issues by dying on a hill that you ought not be dying on as a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's an excellent point. But everybody has their own walk of faith, and different things make different people stumble. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to being respectful of what may come in the way of this person and God. For me, like me personally, I don't mind swearing, but if I am around a person I know who doesn't like swearing, I'm not going to swear, and that's just out of respect for that other person.
Yeah, it's I'm glad, Payton, you actually remembered more of what Paul said, because it's exactly what you said. It's on someone's own conviction, and so what will make someone stumble, what will not, and it, that's why, again, you gotta say only a Sith deals in absolutes. And when talking about these type of things and faith and well, it's sometimes you don't want to say the word, but religion and spirituality, um, you never want to say this will do this will do this is bad. It's hard to say those different things unless it's clearly indicated.
Right.
Um,
Well, I think we're making a distinction here, right? We're making a distinction between something that is clearly morally abhorrent, right? You have the category of
Mhm.
things that are just, they're wrong. And then
Like
you have
the
the
Ten
category of things. Right. The Ten Commandments, they're a reflection of God's character. They explain the moral laws of how the world works. And then we have the things that are not mentioned in Scripture, like rap music or science fiction or horror
I
movies.
don't believe it was around at that time, but
No, it wasn't. Which means that you cannot categorize it as inherently wrong. Which is one of the mistakes the church makes often, is we make up our own rules for what is inherently wrong. As opposed to saying, okay, let's bring our biblical principles to this. Let's talk about this. Let's not make any irrational statements of overarching umbrella of this is entirely wrong. And let's think reasonably about this. And unfortunately, we typically don't do that.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to point out that there may be things that aren't in the Bible that we also know to be wrong.
Yes.
Like just because it's based off of biblical principles. For an extreme example, I believe pedophilia isn't like explicitly mentioned in the Bible, but it's pretty obvious that's wrong.
Exactly.
So,
Something that, well, Payton, you always say this, and it's a phrase that I didn't understand until recently. Like, when I hear you saying it more, I start seeing it other places. It's absolute truth versus truth that is not necessarily not absolute.
Yeah.
And so with that, and for anyone who doesn't understand that statement, is absolute truth is something that is set in stone. That's something that most everyone will commonly agree on, is something that is an absolute. And that's when you can say, deal in that absolute. But there's so many things outside of it where, well, then it's not an absolute truth, therefore you can't deal in those absolutes.
So we're talking about absolutes. Another word you could use in a similar vein would be extremes, right? We've mentioned a few extremes. We're talking like music in the church in general. A verse that I think can be used to demonstrate the extremity of both sides of our spectrum of the church is the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8. She's brought to Christ, and Christ says to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Now, what I've seen is that either neither do I condemn you, church, or you're a go and sin no more, church. Never do you find a neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more, church. It's usually one or the other. It's either we're all love with absolutely no moral discernment, or we're all moral discernment with no love. And that's what you find. And unfortunately, it seems that we're more willing to die on a rock of like rap music versus dying on a rock of moral value. We seem to have a very messed up imbalance of the fights we're willing to have in a lot of churches. and that concerns me because
And
rap music is not the hill you ought to die on.
yeah, and that's why I said earlier, it's a scary word to bring. I don't really like to bring or even say this word a lot of times when I'm talking to anyone, is the word religious and religion, because while it's something that I used to use a lot, say religion classes, religion, you know, but that word, religion is something that can often be associated in whatever religion you're in with extreme values. And so that's why I always want to say, you know spirituality, your own faith. And that's why I love faith talk rather religion talk. And I'm not saying religion is like a bad word. It's religion is a bad thing. I would say I stand with the most values of the Seventh Day Adventist Church. They're what most of my beliefs are in. But before any of that, my loyalty lies with God, with Jesus. I am a child of God before anything. And so I think that's to be clear on the statement of religion is something hard to say.
Well,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Sammy. I think nowadays religion can almost be switched out with the word tradition. If somebody follows something very strictly, they follow it religiously.
Right.
Um, so I guess that's why religion kind of gets a bad rap, because nowadays it's just looked at as a list of all these old traditions that a lot of them are outdated.
well, yeah, I mean,
Stereotypes, yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
So you got to look when you talk about like religion. You got to look at okay, how did Jesus interact with the religious people? When in doubt, look at what Jesus did. And
Yeah.
the people Jesus had the biggest problem with, the people that Jesus got in the biggest scuffles with, were the religious and political leaders of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, these guys who were so stuck in their traditional ways that they couldn't see the heart of God. They lost the heart of God because they were so focused on the laws of God. But what they failed to realize is that the laws of God come from the heart of God. Like the Ten Commandments reflect his character. They kind of forgot about his character and became extreme legalists or extreme traditionalists. So the word religion has gotten a bad rap, but that doesn't mean religion is bad. I mean, Christ said true religion in the sight of God is caring for the orphans and the widows. So what he's saying is we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because the baby's holy, but instead we understand that religion is not the way the world sees religion is not what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Let's just I just want to bring back some statements about music.
There you go.
First of all, I'd love to say that there are um oh, just to lighten up some mood. So we last year when we were senior Bible class, we talked about the different religions of the world, and there was the Sikh religion.
Mm-hmm.
um I loved their music. Their music, like that they played for services and everything. It was, I just thought it was so cool, largely because it had so much percussion in it. I'm a percussionist. I love drums, anything with a beat. I say my heart lives to a beat, a consistent like I have to stay on beat. With anything that's happening. But like I love the sound of their music. And again, just because it's a different religion than I am, doesn't mean can't enjoy some music from them. Go listen to what it's like. um I I thought that was really cool music. More really cool music is 21 Pilots. Shout out 21 Pilots, Tyler Joseph and Josh Dunn. Oh, that brings up a really good point in music. Okay, 21 Pilots. 21 Pilots, guys. So, let me tell you a story. So 21 Pilots, they are a band that has been one of my favorite bands since 7th grade. I know that their fan base gets a large stereotype, and I don't necessarily fit that stereotype. And um, yeah, but still one of my favorite bands because they just are. And so they're actually Christians. They're both Christians. And so the storyline, their albums have storylines. And the storyline of especially some of the past couple reflect a story of salvation, but getting tired of a city where the fire is going out. And I love so there's an album called Trench, which is the second to last album. And the last song on the album, I love one of the lines because it says, "I'm tired of tending to this fire. I've used up all I've collected, and I've singed my hands." Right? And it's like, I, I you never really truly know when you haven't met the artist what their inspiration was for lyrics, but knowing that they're Christians, I love that lyric because I somehow just have a feeling that that's very tightly close related to Christianity, uh, and not just that, but the awaiting of the second coming, because he's just like, so the whole album, the name of the song is "Leave the City." He's ready to leave the city. He's tired of tending to the fire that is, seems to be going out, and he's ready to go back home. And so the chorus, it goes, "They know that it's almost over," and stuff like that. You can take it very cryptic levels, but I love pointing that and using that as something that's related to the second coming. Sorry, that was a long story, but anyways, that was my off-topic thing.
Not off topic. What do you mean off topic? That's very on topic.
Yeah.
It's
and again,
interesting.
Sorry. I just want to point out there's secular artists who, I think, again, when you can find secular artists that maybe don't have the best intentions, but there's also secular artists who want to hint, who put in good values, good morals, and so
there's so much there. Oh my goodness. So first of all, something I noticed about that is like you talk about like secular artists who point to God, but also because that song doesn't explicitly mention God, right? There are also 2 books in the Holy Bible that don't even mention the name of God, right? So we look at Scripture itself and see that His name isn't explicitly mentioned in Esther or the Song of Songs, and yet it's still in the Holy Bible, which must mean that it still is pointing to God, even if it's not directly stated, which I find just fascinating. That of course brings us back to the idea that you can find God even in the secular world. You can still find His footprint. You can find His fingerprints everywhere.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's one of the reasons why I love their band so much. With their music, so many different things. But yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. For whatever reason, just the visual of like pottery or like a clay model and the creators creating it. And when you think about clay, you leave your fingerprints behind on what you've created. So that kind of visual just popped into my mind. I thought it was cool.
Oh yeah, that illustration's used throughout Scripture. The idea that He's the potter, we're the clay. I love the verse that even says, "You are the clay, He's the potter." Is the clay to say to the one who made it, "Why did you make me this way?" Like, hold on, we're down here. We're the ones with the fingerprints all over us. We're covered in God's fingerprints, and one of those ways is through our gifts and things like music, right? We've been given a gift in many different areas. We all have different gifts, and one of the gifts, I think, at least you two, I don't know if I'm so gifted in music, but you two definitely have music gifts.
No, yeah, I always, I always want to, especially in worship, and worship in music is something. It's a whole new topic that I guess can be debated, but also at the same time is something that's really sprung out is entire worship sessions of music. That's something that's become more modern, well, actually, not necessarily, but it's coming back as entire church services of music. And I say that it's more modern, but then I took it back because if you think about, cathedrals, the entire services of music would be done in those. And so I don't want to say it's too modern, but in worship and music, you always want to make sure and remember that who you're doing this for. And,
Right.
I always, especially on Sabbath, try to remind myself, I'm not doing this for me, but as well, this isn't coming from me either.
Right.
None of this that flows out of me, is necessarily of my own. This is something, that I'm helping to share with others, and as well as wanting to worship with others and give praise.
You know, kind of like when you talk about like the gifts of music and that it's not about us and stuff like that. I'm reminded of how Paul. I think one of the ways Paul avoided being arrogant was how he boasted of his infirmities. He literally said like, I'm gonna brag about the miserable wretch that I am to remind myself that any good thing that I do is not of me. I just find that fascinating when it comes to our gifts. But when you're talking about music, like up on stage, right? I was reminded of how some of my best memories involving music were not on stage, actually. So a couple moments recently, like after events here on the college campus, like there'll be small groups, and they'll be just standing around in a circle outside at night, and they'll just start kind of like singing hymns. No instrumental, no direction, just random people. And I don't ever sing up front, but I'll join in. I'll get in the circle and singing hymns together. Like the other day, we all started singing "I've Decided to Follow Jesus," and I had mentioned once we finished singing it, hey, man, every time I hear that song, I just think of that story behind the song every time. And Pastor K turned to me and was like, "Well, you got to tell the story." So then he's like, "Now tell the whole story to the whole." And I just ended up telling the whole story to the whole group of people. And it's like you form these memories through music, often unscripted, just off the cuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's a, and that's something I love to cover on, and I always try to look for meaningful lyrics when I'm writing lyrics if I'm writing a song. And though I'm not, I would guess I would say I'm writing more secular music. I always want to have symbolism, meaning, for every lyric, and um, that's something I love about artists, and that's is their symbolism and their way to tell a story, their way to share their own experience in a way that is exploited through music, through song, is something that then is so powerful. And another hymn that I love the story for behind it is in one of my favorite hymns. I will say I don't know a lot of hymns, but "It Is Well" is I love that hymn, and the story behind it is so powerful. Just really like extremely brief explanation is the guy who wrote it, he lost everything. He lost his family, his and his everything. Yet he was able to write those words, "It is well in my soul," and bringing faith back to music. I think that it's almost a good way to close off this talk, is that no matter what, always know what's going on with music, but it can always point you back to God. And I love those lyrics. "It is well in my soul because God is with me."
I love that. Isn't it interesting how so many of those like classic hymns have somewhat of a solemn background to them? Like, of course, "It Is Well" is an example, and also "I've Decided to Follow Jesus" is literally about the whole family dying. But then it leads to something greater. It leads to the whole village being converted. Or even the most prominent example of "Amazing Grace," which is written by a slave trader who drove across the seas with slaves, saying in his "Amazing Grace," "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saves the wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." And it's these songs written by these people who had horrible things happen to them, but they rejoice nonetheless. And I think that's a very uplifting thing about music, that it can, a lot of the times the best music is written by people who went through trouble, because then afterwards they can tell that story through music in a way that they can't even express any other way.
Yeah, music's the ultimate form of expression. It's just something about a BPM and a key that just gets you writing. But I think we're about out of time for this episode. I think we're about landing the plane here. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Faith Talk.
Check us out on all of our socials. That'll be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and all the above. We also are on YouTube.
And subscribe to all our channels, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, things like that.
And be sure to check out our merch store. It not only supports us, but it helps us bring you higher quality content.
Yeah, and remember, we got a weekly word on Wednesday every week on Get This Wednesday.
and episodes come out first of the month.
Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully we'll catch you on the next one.
God bless.